Of course, we have to mention Alex Eala, the incredible fandom coming, across the globe, especially from the Filipino community. So, that is very much on my mind. And then just the depth of our competition. We've had 4 major tournaments so far already in 26.
You want to know how powerful Alex Eala has become? The woman who runs the entire Women's Tennis Association, the person sitting at the very top of the most prestigious women's sports organization on the planet, just went on record. And what she said didn't sound like a press release. It didn't sound like corporate speak. It sounded like someone who had been watching the haters, had been watching the doubters, had been watching the people who dismissed a 20-year-old Filipino girl as a fluke, a gimmick, a one-tournament wonder, and finally decided she had seen enough.
Filipinos are super hardworking, super passionate, so I'm sure if we nourish our tennis players, then slowly we can start to build, more and more champions. Yeah.
Valerie Camillo, new WTA Chair, veteran executive who has worked at the highest levels of the NBA, the NHL, and Major League Baseball. A woman who does not speak carelessly. A woman who chooses every word with the precision of someone who understands how much power those words carry. And she looked at what Alex Eala has done to the tennis world in the past 12 months. The sold-out stadiums, the broken records, the nation of 115 million people brought to its knees every time she steps on a court. And she said something that landed like a thunderclap across the entire sports industry. She called it momentum. She called it opportunity. She called this moment the Eala moment. The reason the WTA is restructuring itself at its core to keep up. The haters wanted proof that Eala was just a viral moment. The WTA chair just handed them a verdict instead. And it is absolutely devastating for everyone who bet against her.
Same deal on the women's side for Alex Eala. I mean, it is no longer possible, regardless of their seeding, to put these 2 players on non-show courts.
No, I mean, Alex Eala could be up there for maybe the strongest crowd support from her fans in the entire world. Everywhere she goes, she has so many people who believe in her. She's so important to all of her fans, and that all started right here, Hayes. Last year, that run she had here in Miami, she became a crowd darling, and she's carried herself with such great poise and grace all the way through her journey.
Let's go through every single word, every single fact, every single reason why what is happening right now is bigger than tennis, bigger than sport, and bigger than anything the WTA has seen in the modern era. Buckle in. This is going to blow your mind. Let us start with who Valerie Camillo actually is, because this matters enormously. This is not some lifetime tennis insider who grew up in the country clubs of Europe and learned to speak the language of the WTA establishment. Valerie Camillo is a veteran executive across the NBA, the NHL, and Major League Baseball, 3 of the most commercially ruthless, revenue-driven, fan-obsessed sports organizations in the world. And this woman, this battle-hardened, sharp-eyed sports executive who has seen everything, walked into her role as WTA chair, spent her first 90 days listening, watching, and assessing the state of women's tennis. And here is what she found.
An incredible thing was signed shortly after I stepped into the role, and what momentum and what wind at my back to have as I step in.
Enthusiastic global fan engagement, elite competition, momentum, opportunity. She is describing things that were not happening at this scale before Alex Eala exploded onto the scene. She is describing a WTA that is being revitalized, tournament by tournament, city by city, court by court, by a phenomenon so powerful that even the most skeptical executive in women's sports cannot look away from it. And she didn't just talk about it in abstract terms. She put action behind it. Camillo announced the launch of a new Tour Architecture Council, a sweeping structural reform of the entire WTA Tour framework, with the explicit goal of implementing real, tangible change by the 2027 season. She is not patching holes, she is rebuilding the foundation, and she is doing it now, in the middle of a season where one player has demonstrated month after month that the sport's potential for global growth is far bigger than anyone previously imagined. That player is Alex Eala, and every boardroom decision being made inside the WTA right now has her fingerprints all over it.
She's the right person for it. As a top player, the calendar is not felt equally by all players. Top players certainly go deeper within tournaments and have some unique issues there. And so important for a top player's voice to be represented. She's well respected.
But let's be honest. Let's be brutally, uncomfortably honest about what was happening to Alex Eala before Valerie Camillo arrived and before the numbers became impossible to ignore. Because there were people, lots of them, who looked at this 20-year-old Filipino girl and saw a problem to be managed rather than a force to be celebrated. They saw crowds of Filipino fans and worried about logistics. They saw a player ranked outside the top 100 and gave her small courts and late-night slots and wildcard entries they had to be persuaded to extend. They saw a culture of devotion so intense and so unfamiliar to the typical WTA demographic that they didn't quite know what to do with it. And so, too often, they did the wrong thing. At the Australian Open in January 2026, the first Grand Slam where Eala was no longer a qualifier but a fully fledged main draw player, some fans were forced to stand during her first-round match after the tournament assigned her to a smaller court. Hundreds were seemingly turned away at the entrances. At the biggest Grand Slam in the Southern Hemisphere, turned away. Because the establishment looked at a world-ranked player with nearly 1 million Instagram followers and a fan base that had already packed courts in 3 countries, and still gave her a court built for 1,000 people. Even Novak Djokovic, on his way to the men's final, commented on it publicly.
Alex Eala, that's been a talk, and which is understandable. There's some players coming from respective countries, like she's coming from Philippines, which is now a big deal. She's been the biggest ever, tennis player from that country, which is a big country, and there's big interest.
Djokovic, 24 Grand Slam titles, the greatest player in the history of the sport, walking into a Grand Slam final and stopping to defend Alex Eala's right to a bigger court. When Djokovic is advocating for better treatment of a 20-year-old Filipino girl in a press conference, you know that the establishment's negligence has become too visible to pretend it isn't happening. And it didn't stop at the Australian Open. At Indian Wells, the desert jewel of the WTA calendar, Eala's pre-tournament press conference generated 196,000 views, almost twice that of Novak Djokovic, and more than 6 times the views of eventual men's champion Carlos Alcaraz. The reigning US Open champion Coco Gauff? The current world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka? Numbers that don't come close. And yet, throughout the tournament, the scheduling decisions still reflected an organization struggling to keep pace with what was happening right in front of its eyes. But Valerie Camillo sees it, and she is not struggling. She is accelerating. Now let's talk about what the WTA has already been forced to do because of Alex Eala. Because this is where the haters really run out of arguments. This is where the proof stops being anecdotal and becomes institutional. It becomes policy. It becomes a new country on the WTA calendar. It becomes structural reform. It becomes the WTA bending itself around a 20-year-old Filipino woman's gravitational pull. In November 2025, capitalizing on the country's surging interest in tennis, driven entirely by Eala's rise, the WTA announced the creation of the Philippine Women's Open, a WTA 125 event, to be held in Manila in January 2026. Let me make this absolutely plain. The Philippines had never, in the entire 50-year history of the WTA Tour, hosted a sanctioned professional women's tennis event. Not a WTA 125, not a WTA 250, nothing. Zero. For 5 decades, the Philippines was invisible on the WTA map. And then, Alex Eala happened. And within a year of her Miami breakthrough, the WTA came knocking on Manila's door. History was made in January 2026 as the Philippine Women's Open launched as the country's first ever WTA tournament, an event largely fueled by the growing star power of Alex Eala.
Well, I think this is a good stepping stone, like I've mentioned before. In my opinion, women's tennis especially has been overlooked for a long time. You know, on top of tennis already not being such a popular sport here in the Philippines, I heard the other day that locally there were only, for men, 8 professional tournaments around the Philippines, and for women only 2. So to have a WTA here would, like I said, is a great stepping stone, and I think a wake-up call for the people who are able to help and able to do something about it.
Build more champions. She is not just playing for herself. She never was. She is playing for a blueprint. She is playing to prove that a kid from Quezon City, without the resources of a wealthy federation, without the infrastructure of a traditional tennis nation, without the privilege of growing up on clay courts in Europe, can walk into the biggest stages in women's tennis and take them apart, one Grand Slam champion at a time. And the WTA Chair sees it, and she is building the infrastructure to match it. Now let's talk about the haters specifically, because they exist, they are loud, and they are running out of places to hide. Since Eala's breakthrough, there has been a persistent, ugly undercurrent of dismissal. Critics who pointed to her ranking, commentators who called her fanbase a novelty, tennis insiders who whispered that the Filipino crowds were passionate but unsophisticated, that they cheered at the wrong moments, that they didn't understand the game, that their presence changed the atmosphere in ways that disadvantaged other players. As if passion is a problem, as if devotion is a disqualification. And then Coco Gauff, world number 4, US Open champion, the biggest American star in women's tennis, walked onto the court in Dubai, won her match against Eala, and instead of celebrating, took the microphone and said the most powerful thing a champion can say. She thanked Alex Eala for bringing a new demographic to the sport. The reigning US Open champion, standing in the middle of a stadium packed with the very fans the critics called disruptive, and thanking them. Thanking Eala for them. As if to say to every person who called this a circus, you are wrong. This is tennis. This is what tennis should always have been. The Phil Star, one of the Philippines' most respected publications, put it bluntly. The Eala effect is influencing the decisions of the WTA itself. Due to overflowing Filipino crowds, her matches are now being moved to center court. Moreover, Filipino fans are very accepting, ready to embrace opponents and doubles partners alike, something WTA professionals never experience. Something WTA professionals never experience. Players who have competed for years, who have served their time on the tour, who have never once felt the warmth of a crowd that not only cheers their own, but applauds everyone. Those players are encountering that for the first time because of Alex Eala's fans. And the haters want to call that a problem.
Please! Next guys, next please! Let's go! Next please! Let's go! Yay!
A Dubai-based Filipino fan described Eala as representing more than just talent. She represents hope and pride for Filipinos. Seeing a young athlete compete and succeed on the international stage shows what we are capable of globally. Hope and pride. Those are not sports words. Those are survival words. Those are the words of a diaspora. 10 million Filipinos scattered across every continent on Earth, working jobs far from their families, sending money home, carrying their country in their hearts every single day, who found, in the image of a 20-year-old girl on a tennis court in Miami, something that made the distance feel smaller, something that made the sacrifice feel worthwhile, something that made the pride feel justified. And Valerie Camillo walks into the WTA chair position and looks at those 10 million people suddenly watching women's tennis, and she sees the future of her sport. Not a demographic to be accommodated, not a crowd to be managed, the future. Eala said at Indian Wells,
I think the WTA is a great platform for us professional women tennis players, though I think it gives us a lot of opportunity. I'm very grateful for everything they have built for us, given us a chance to become these stars and do what we love in such grand stages. So
She is grateful. After everything. After the small courts and the late-night slots and the wild card invitations they were slow to extend and the scheduling decisions that left her fans locked outside in the cold. She is still gracious. She is still grateful. She is still standing there with a smile, lifting the WTA in her press conferences, calling it a great platform, crediting the organization with giving her opportunities. When the truth, the full, uncomfortable truth, is that she gave them the opportunity. She gave them a new continent of fans. She gave them a new market. She gave them Dubai's 48% ticket sales jump and Manila's first WTA tournament and press conference view counts that made Djokovic look like a regional club player. And now the WTA chair, Valerie Camillo, the most commercially literate person to ever sit in that role, has looked at all of it, absorbed all of it, and said publicly, "This is momentum. This is opportunity. And it is my job to make sure we capitalize on it." That sentence, capitalize on this momentum, is the most important thing the WTA has said in years, because it means they are no longer just reacting to Alex Eala. They are no longer scrambling to adjust court assignments and printing extra tickets and apologizing for inadequate venues. They are planning around her. They are building structures, tour architecture councils, new market entries, calendar reforms, designed to ensure that what she has started does not get wasted by an organization too slow to hold it. Eala herself said her goal is to win Grand Slams and to be world #1. Those are kind of everybody's dream, and I'm someone who's quite ambitious. World #1. She said it out loud. And from 140th in the world 18 months ago to 29th in the world today, a jump of 24 places in just 3 months of the 2026 season, the trajectory is not a gentle slope. It is a rocket. And the WTA chair just confirmed that the organization is clearing the runway. Back home in Manila, Eala told reporters something that revealed exactly how completely she understands what she is building. Growing up, I noticed tennis is very inaccessible in the Philippines. Thankfully, tennis has risen in popularity at home, and everyone comes up to me whenever I go back. It's so hard to get courts now, and that's a good thing. Because when I was younger, the courts were empty. The courts were empty. Now they can't get a booking. In 1 year. In 1 year, Alexandra Eala transformed the tennis infrastructure of an entire nation. Not with government funding, not with federation investment, not with infrastructure programs or grassroots initiatives, but by walking onto a court in Miami ranked 140th in the world and refusing to lose. That is what the WTA chair is praising. That is what the WTA chair is building around. That is what the haters cannot explain, cannot diminish, cannot fit into their framework of rankings and seedings and historical precedent. Because there is no historical precedent. This has never happened before. A player has never single-handedly opened an entire country, an entire region, to women's professional tennis the way Alexandra Eala has opened Southeast Asia. And the best part? The absolute best, most delicious, most poetic part of this entire story? She is 20 years old. She has not yet won a Grand Slam. She has not yet cracked the top 20. The serve that Greg Rusedski wants to help unlock is still a work in progress. The game that Paul Annacone said he loved is still developing. The player that Novak Djokovic stopped to defend in a Grand Slam press conference is still in the early chapters of a career that, if the WTA chair gets her way, if the Tour Architecture Council delivers, if the momentum continues to build the way it has been building, will rewrite the history of the sport. The WTA chair didn't just praise Alex Eala. She restructured an entire organization around the world that Eala is creating. She called it momentum. She called it opportunity. She said it is her priority to capitalize on it. The haters called her a flash in the pan. The WTA just built a new wing onto the house. Alexandra Eala isn't the future of women's tennis anymore. She's already the present. And the most powerful executive in the sport just stood up and said so. Laban, Alex. The whole world is watching, and the WTA Chair is making sure they always will be. If you felt every word of this story, if you are riding with Alexandra Eala from 29 to number 1, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Because Miami is happening right now, and the greatest chapter of this story has not even been written yet.